It's Matthew 8:23-27. So without warning, this furious storm comes up on the lake, so there was danger of them sinking. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat under some partial decking. So what does his sleeping tell us? First of all, his body is human. He is tired from the day's work and he needs rest. It tells us about his sovereignty and authority. Even while he is asleep physically, he is able to sustain the universe. Though his body has normal physical weaknesses, as God, he cannot be overcome. And it tells us his knowledge. Even in a storm, he has no fear. He can go to sleep. At the same time, his sleeping should not be interpreted that he doesn't care about their trouble or that their fear. And his sleeping obviously does not mean that he's not going to involve himself when they have problems. Sometimes even we have a passing thought that it seems like God is sleeping rather than helping us, and that he doesn't care or isn't going to get involved. But none of that is true.
কিন্তু বাস্তবিক অর্থে এই যে পোষণকৃত ধারণাগুলোর একটাও সঠিক নয়।
So here we see the disciples are afraid for their lives. Can you imagine their discussion about whether to wake him up or not? Some of the disciples probably wanted to be respectful. Some were maybe even a little angry that he was even sleeping. But what were they expecting him to do when they woke him up? It must have been to somehow help them or even save them. They were afraid they were going to die. It was a request from fear. It was a cry of desperation. But we see he responded because they asked. It teaches us an important lesson about prayer. This desperate call on God is so common to all humanity. God, help me. God, we are desperate. We are at our end. Do something. We want God to rise up and act on our behalf, to come and meet our need. And this is exactly what we expect God to do. Don't be asleep when I'm in trouble. We want God to take away what threatens us. We are experiencing the storms of life all the time. It disrupts our lives and takes away our sense of peace. But God is never sleeping. Jesus replied to them, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" It took him so long to break down their mindset that he's more than a miracle-working prophet. In the Jewish mindset, it was impossible for God to have a son and to appear in human form, so I'm sure they still didn't grasp who he truly was. And notice, he rebuked them not for what they asked or for their motive in asking, but for their fear and lack of faith. He doesn't say that he minded that they woke him up. He doesn't say that he didn't like their attitude. He doesn't say that they shouldn't have asked that. What he minded was their lack of faith. See, their faith was defeated by the danger they saw around them. It says, then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and it was completely calm. Psalm 107, verse 29, tells us that the one who rules the winds and the sea is God himself. So Jesus is showing that he is God. Now, instead of a great storm, there is great calm. The point is his complete authority. He is the God who cares and who acts. Verse 27 says, the men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this that even the winds and the waves obey him? We have to believe the disciples were completely stunned. It's impossible to know what they had in mind when they woke him up, but it seems that it wasn't this. Interesting, though, no matter what they expected, this clearly answered their request. God doesn't always do things the way we had expected. They have experienced the true wonder of being with Jesus. And each day they get a more complete picture of who he really
এবং
is. So, what comments or questions do they have?
আমার একটা মন্তব্য আছে দাদা। আমার
হ্যাঁ,
মন্তব্য
বলুন।
হচ্ছে
So, Brother Shoag has a question out of this, that even though they knew that they have their master in the boat, and he can do miracles, then even though why they couldn't hold their faith, why Jesus had to say, "Where is your faith?" Because they couldn't had full faith, full trust, believe on Jesus.
The disciples struggled with faith. When he was feeding the 5,000, he told the disciples to act in faith to feed them, and they didn't understand. When he went to raise Lazarus from the dead, they didn't understand. They didn't even expect a miracle. Even when Jesus had told them he was going to rise from the dead, they didn't understand and they didn't believe that. We find that the disciples really never did understand or gain faith until after the resurrection when the Holy Spirit came upon them. Anything else?
Is that সেটা ছিল শিষ্যদের বড় সমস্যা। আমাদের
যিশু যে মৃত্যু থেকে জীবিত হয়ে ওঠার যে
Brother Shubho, he remembers the story after death. Jesus came, and Thomas, he didn't believe, and he said that if I do not put my finger on the hole of Jesus' palm, I won't believe. So Jesus appeared, and then Jesus also said that they bless those who believe me without seeing, like that. So even though we can find the disciples didn't have full faith, yeah, that's another example he remembers. So he told that.
Yes, even though we have seen God's work and we are filled with the Holy Spirit, sometimes it's very difficult for us to live a life of faith the way God expects us to.
আমি আরেকটা ছোট্ট এক্সাম্পল দিচ্ছি, যেমন আমাদের জীবনে ঝড়